We're live.
Good evening. I thank you all for joining us on this evening for our very first um, sponsored virtual event. Um, we are partnering. I'm Regina Garcia from Pitt Community College, and we are partnering with East Carolina University, Department of Ethnic Studies and English, as well as Pitt Community College, English and Humanities, and the Multicultural Activities Committee, also known as the Mighty MAC. I am Regina Garcia, and I am the chair of the MAC committee, also an English instructor here at Pitt, and I am excited to see you all on this evening. Here at PCC, we are in the work of achieving the dream. And so, as such, I am excited at this point to bring forward, to give us a resounding welcome, the chair of our Achieving the Dream initiative here at Pitt Community College. I present to you Dr. Katrina Arnold. She is the Director of Academic Support at Pitt Community College, and she is the co-chair for Achieving the Dream. Dr. Arnold, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fire at the Crossroads. We are so excited that you decided to join us this evening and engage in presentations and discussions about addressing the intersectionality of race, injustice, disparities, self-possession, and embedded beliefs in literature and life. As Ms. Garcia stated, tonight's event is a collaboration between the Pitt Community College Multicultural Activities Committee, the Pitt Community College English and Humanities Department, and the East Carolina University Ethnic Studies and English Departments. I assure you that this partnership has planned an experience for you this evening that will provide an in-depth explanation of culture and social justice through the lens of various writers. Pitt Community College has always been committed to educating and empowering people for success. And just last year, we became an Achieving the Dream institution. Achieving the Dream, also known as ATD, is a national network of more than 220 colleges in 41 states dedicated to helping more community college students, particularly low-income students and racially minoritized students, earn a college certificate, diploma, or degree. Achieving the Dream supports institutions in centering equity, especially racial equity, in redesign work. Tonight's event aligns with the goals and objectives of ATD, and we are committed to providing a variety of programming and events to highlight issues such as racism, equity, racial equity, and social justice. So again, I would like to welcome you all to tonight's presentation. A special thank you to Pitt Community College faculty and staff, East Carolina University faculty and staff, and our community members for being with us this evening. And an extra special thank you to PCC and ECU students who are in attendance this evening. I hope you all enjoy tonight's event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold, for that warm, wonderful welcome. Next, I want to talk about how we got here. Sometimes all it takes is the spark of an idea to start a fire. And this semester, that spark comes from Professor Scott Temple, an instructor in our English and Humanities program here at Pitt Community College. He is a person who is committed to the conversation and the uncovering of connections that are established between literature and life. Professor Temple will at this time be providing some background on perspective and the various lenses that we may be bringing to a presentation such as this that addresses the complex issue of race and intersectionality. Be open and hear clearly. On Loosing and Listening, we welcome Professor Scott Temple.
Thank you so much, Regina. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here. And once again, thank you, Regina and Dr. Arnold. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It is a pleasure to be here. We gather willingly, collectively, and in solidarity as free people. Freedom should never be taken for granted. And although promised, it is not necessarily always fully granted or enjoyed by. We must fight to keep everyone equal and free. First off, I appreciate everyone who has come together to occupy this space and place. Although a cyberspace, it is originating from the servers of Pitt Community College on the eastern side of North Carolina, along the pine forest and waterways of the Tuscarora Nations, whose land was stolen by the white settlers so farm country could be established, so plantations could be built, so land could be toiled on by the enslaved people of Africa, the Caribbean, and indigenous peoples from, well, Turtle Island, now known as the United States. So this space and place here in eastern North Carolina, land that has seen so much rich history, defeats and triumphs, a land so deep in colonization and plantation history, continues to this day to be a voice for change, for justice, and for all people to find unity and equality. As Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his book, Between the World and Me, says, race is the father of racism. Coates is saying that the birth of the term race, a human construct made popular in the 18th century, is to create hierarchy of race, where whiteness is measured against blackness and is the very idea of white supremacy. On one side of this conversation, I feel a tad bit hypocritical about about being one of the first presenters, because I don't want it to be perceived that I'm hijacking a conversation about race and or racism in America. I do feel it's important to address whiteness and its power, because to ignore racism, to not take a stance, is to remain silent is a support of racism. I want to address the feelings white people might have if you're a white listener. As I am a white male, obviously, myself, the pronoun you I am using here is associated with those who identify in the white race. I am asking you to pack up your shame and guilt if it surfaces, because it will only make you retreat into defensiveness, into a place that stops productive conversations from taking place. Defensive retreat enables inaction and therefore supports racism. Although socialization, if we want to accept it or not, we hold and the embedded ideas of racist constructs. And we must come to terms with it, and we must fight against that type of socialization. We have been socialized to think certain racial ways, and we must deconstruct that way of thinking in order to make meaningful changes. When I say certain racial ways of thinking, I am talking more about the subtext, the way systems work, the way white people tend to overlook the racial prejudice that is in the fabric. I'm not necessarily addressing the blatant racial hatred that typically is associated with racist behavior that we condemn and should condemn. I'm addressing what are called microaggressions and policies and systems of institutional racism. Action, big and small, that white people do without conscious consideration to other ethnic groups and cultures. When we do not listen with openness, if we do not get rid of defensiveness, actually, then we cannot make meaningful avenues for effective change. This effective change is rooted in the intersection of recognizing white privilege and someone else's oppression. To paraphrase Aluo from his book, So You Want to Talk About Race, the intersection is the crossroads. This is the point that we as white people should reflect upon. This is where effective change towards adopting anti-racial and anti-racist policies and attitudes can take shape. Dr. Robin DiAngelo, in her book, White Fragility, confidently articulates the fragility white people have when confronting the racism in society. It is much easier to say, I am not to blame, than to take an active stance against racism that is socialized into who we are in our social systems. However, we are responsible for the system outcomes of today. I ask that you listen to the narratives shared this evening without internalizing judgment or building walls. Be an open conduit to allow yourself to experience the narratives and be humble enough to understand that centuries of white male control, power, and authority is embedded into all the systems: law, government, school, police, army, banking, business, environmental policy, sports, medicine, and daily life. To quote Malala, a young student activist for women's rights to education and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, says, education gives you the power to question things, the power to challenge things, to be independent. There is a moment where you have to choose whether to be silent or stand up. This is often a response from my white peers who bring up that they are overlooked at their daily struggles as white people. And it is not fair that all the focus is placed on Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations, that they too have a hard time finding jobs, paying bills, raising a family. I tell them that I would never diminish their struggles, and I would never want somebody to not be heard. The struggles in the white community can have certain similarities to the struggles in the Black and brown communities. Day-to-day life can be difficult. There's no doubt. However, there is a major difference. White people are much more statistically supported to move up economically or recover from downturns. White people do not have to deal with racism as a major barrier from people or institutions that hold them back. So let's define some terms here. Systematic racism, defined by Dr. Robin DiAngelo, is collective racial prejudice backed by legal authority and institutional control. Institutional racism is embedded in media, like I said, family, religion, education, language, economics, criminal justice systems. It is embedded in our cultural definitions of what is normal, real, correct, beautiful, and valuable. Notice the key word, racial prejudice, backed by legal authority and institutional control. Racist, defined by Ibram X. Kendi, says one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inactions or expressing a racist idea. I am more concerned about the inactions in Kendi's definition. Though through dismissing racism, saying you are colorblind or that you are not racist, you are ignoring racism that is embedded in the system. We need to take anti-racist stances and be proactive. Prejudice versus discrimination and the forced concept of reverse racism. Let's just set the record straight right away. There is no such thing as reverse racism because minority populations do not have the legal authority and institutional control to deny anyone the right to vote, to enslave others, to create laws that target specific groups of people, or set policies that financially disadvantage one group over the other. However, white people do have the legal authority and institutional control to create racial prejudice of these types. The white male is the main controlling gender. Therefore, white people need to deconstruct their processes and allow the voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities to influence the systems of control and gain equal access to authority. This does not mean there is not discrimination of people from different economic classes, regions, and dialects or genders. The discrimination is well documented, but it's not racial prejudice. Therefore, reverse racism is not possible in a system controlled by 90% white males. So I am asking you to let down your defensiveness, your guilt and shame, open your hearts, your ears, and your humility, and let the narratives you hear tonight be a way to meet at the crossroads of social change. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Temple. That was so enlightening. I learned something from that. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. We want to talk a little bit about the fire. And so you may ask yourself, well, why the fire at the crossroads? And so what we're going to go into now is a framing of the fire. As we broach this concept of fire at the crossroads, I would like for us to begin by considering the concept of fire itself. It is not an unfamiliar imagery in this day and time, a time when indeed fire burns on all fronts. As we literally look to the west in our country, we see fire ravaging lands and homes and even lives, seemingly unstoppable fires in California and Colorado and many other places. We see fires also that burn out of anger and frustration and cries for attention and address, humanly manifested as people continue to die without true justice. People who have experienced unholy treatment. That is no eye for an eye, no hand for a hand, yet they pay a cost, oftentimes with their very lives, for little or nothing. Buildings have burned, and people on all sides have suffered loss unimaginable. And then there are the fires we cannot always see or recognize if we are not living them, the fires that live in literature and in life, for indeed, art imitates life. For if it lives in the pages of books, it also lives in the stages of life and places of the human heart. The fire that burns from the inside of human flesh and bubbles to the surface through fingertips and pins and mouths. These fires express the nature of an existence, living black and brown in a complicated land. This concept of crossing bodies with daily circumstance manifests in the coinage of the term intersectionality. It is a crossroad, as Professor Temple stated earlier, that has the potential to incite fear and or failure when color, ethnicity, gender, and or race encounters day-to-day realities like walking, sleeping, running, eating, loving, driving, voting, working, shopping, just being, just eking out that day-to-day of what should be normal. However, in this social media revolution, we see the normal actually become dangerously abnormal. And we know that this is not new. For from the inception of the African existence in the United States, crossroads for people of color have often been so perilous that they are chronicled and counted and recounted over and over, literally, poetically, subversively, starkly, in the literature of writers for centuries. Writers like Wheatley, Hughes, Brown, Dunbar, Hurston, Baldwin, Baraka, Sanchez, Giovanni, Peel, Staples, Green, Angelou, Coates, Randall Williams, Keenan, Johnson, and Shelton Green, and many others. They remind us in prophetic, resounding voice that the fire still burns. The media has evidenced it. The justice system has evidenced it. The disparities that exist among us evidence it. The fires have sparked the light that shows an underbelly of a seething goo that has not disappeared. The fire that writers have, as my grandmama would say, shut up in their bones, still consumes, bursts forth, and reveals that the crossroads still hotly burn. In the HBO series Lovecraft Country, characters often highlight the destruction by fire that have plagued this country for centuries. As the fires flamed in an extraordinary and horrific depiction of the fires that burned during the very real but only recently acknowledged Tulsa massacre, the words of poet Sonia Sanchez overlay music and become a part of an opera that serves as a requiem for death and for life. As the thriving African-American community was burning, destroyed by fire, indeed part of our heroine Letty's literal walk through the fire, these words remind us that fire, even in its horror, can be fought with fire. They read in part, "Sometimes I wonder what to say to you now in the soft afternoon air as you hold us all in a single death. I say, where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? You got to find it and pass it on. You got to find it and pass it on. From you and to me, from me to her, from her to him, from the son to the father, from the brother to the sister, from the daughter to the mother, from the mother to the child. Where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? Can't you smell it coming out of our past? The fire of living, not dying. The fire of loving, not killing. The fire of blackness, not gangster shadows. Where is our beautiful fire that gave light to the world? The fire of pyramids, the fire that burned through the holes of slave ships and made us breathe, the fire that made guts into chitterlings, the fire that took rhythms and made jazz, the fire of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers, the fire that took street talk sounds and made righteous emotep raps. Where is your fire? The torch of life, full of Nzinga and Nat Turner and Garvey and Du Bois and Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin and Malcolm and Mandela. Sister, sister, brother, brother, come, come. Tonight, we fight fire with fire at the crossroads. And I am excited that we have a cultural, literary icon, a gift in our midst for this evening. Here to introduce her, I present to you Lead Professor of Speech Communications at Pitt Community College, Crystal Howard, who will come forward.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Regina Garcia, for that wonderful introduction and lighting the fire up under all of us. So I am here tonight, and I'm honored to introduce Jackie Shelton Green. She's the 9th Poet Laureate of North Carolina, the first African American and third woman to be appointed as the North Carolina Poet Laureate. She is a 2019 Academy of American Poet Laureate Fellow, 2014 North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame inductee, 2009 NC Piedmont Laureate appointment, 2003 recipient of the North Carolina Award for Literature. Jackie Shelton Green teaches documentary poetry at Duke University Center for Documentary Studies and has been named the 2021 Frank B. Hines Writer in Residence at UNC Chapel Hill. Her publications include Dead on Arrival, Masks, Dead on Arrival and New Poems, Conjure Blues, Singing a Tree into Dance, Breath of the Song, Feeding the Light, and I Want to Undie You. On Juneteenth, 2020, she released her first LP, poetry album, The River Speaks of Thirst, produced by Soul City Sounds and Clearly Records. Jackie Shelton Green is the owner of Sister Write, providing writing retreats for women writers in Sedona, Arizona, Martha's Vineyard, Ocracoke, North Carolina, Northern Morocco, and Tullamore, Ireland. Let us all give a warm virtual welcome and turn our attention to Jackie Shelton Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Howard. I'm not sure why I'm speaking. I think that the fire is burning high and burning hot, and we can all just go home. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Garcia, for that rousing, what's that thing you do before church? For that rousing, getting the folk ready, getting the folk happy. So good evening. I am truly grateful and humbled by this invitation extended to me by Professors Regina Garcia and Professor Scott Temple to participate in what I consider a much needed educational symposium, but even more importantly, a really frank and respectful conversation about the fire at the crossroads. Truly, we are all standing at this crossroads. We can smell the smoke and we are experiencing the truth inside of that smoke. And it is choking all of us, our families, our planet, and especially our children. And I just got a signal that my power is going to go off. How did I do that? 1 minute. Well, this has never happened before. Just a second. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry about that. But it happens. It happens. Truly, we are all standing at this crossroads. We can smell the smoke and we are experiencing that truth inside of that smoke. And it is choking all of us, our families, our planet, and especially our children. None of us will successfully cross this crossroads without love, patience, an open heart, and compassionate listening to each other. Will we perish at the crossroads and our racism, our sexism, our homophobia, classism, ageism, and ableism? Or will we cleanse and open our hearts to the medicine of truth? Will we continue to walk separately, or will we embrace each other in hope? None of us can cross the fire at the crossroads without a collective breath that calls for peace. Peace and justice every day, all the time. None of us can cross the fire at the crossroads without a North Star. This evening, I ask you, what is your North Star? We all need an ancestral North Star for guiding us deep into this interior of 400 years in America. Love note to the ancestors. We cannot prevent the birds of sorrow from flying over our heads, but we can refuse to let them build nest in our hair. Who stops to record the whimpering of an ocean? I've seen you wrestling with the frozen tears of a moon. I know how you measure your heartbeats with the stretching of olive branches. I've heard you scolding the wind for changing her course, her song. I listened to you scrape your crystallized tears from the roof of your mother's grave, from the hem of your sister's shroud, from the womb of a raped daughter. I have watched prayers crawl up your arms and dig into your heart. I become blinded by all the light that lives there, all the light that your hands are harvesting, all the light and love you offered to each Middle Passage morning when you decided to live and scatter your seeds. Dear ancestors, thank you for being our mirrors, showing us that we are not the stories that anyone has made of us. We never were. We are energy and matter untethered from those who meant to contain us. We are rearranging the structure of who we be and who we are becoming collectively in the face of any punitive narratives, puny and punitive narratives that have been thrust upon us. This evening, I borrow the language of T.S. Lewis, which states, "Holy places are dark places. It is life and strength, not knowledge and words, that we get in them. Holy wisdom is not clear and thin like water, but thick and dark like blood." Point Comfort, Virginia, 1619, was a holy place, thick and dark like the blood of Angela, who was brought to Jamestown's muddy shores. Angela was the first African-American woman documented in Africa. She is seen as a seminal figure in American history, a symbol of 400 years of brutal subjugation that left millions of men, women, and children enslaved at the start of the Civil War. Historians are in search of Angela's true identity. Angela was her anglicized name. She is listed in the 1624 and 1625 census as living in the household of Captain William Pierce, first as Angelo A. Nakia, and then listed as Angela, Negro woman, in by treasurer. Angela was taken captive in 1619 during a war in Congo. She was forced aboard a slave ship, the San Juan Bautista in Luanda, which was then a bustling slave trading port on the coast of West Africa, according to historians of the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation. The ship was headed for Veracruz on the coast of Mexico. According to historians, The ship was overcrowded. It suffered horrible mortality on the voyage to Vera Cruz. More than 120 Africans aboard died en route. In the middle of passage, the slave ship was attacked by 2 English pirate ships, the Treasurer and the White Lion. Angela arrived on the Treasurer and wound up in the household of Pierce. Angela, nameless, storyless, except for the story of enslavement. By the time she arrived in Virginia, she had survived much. And then in 1626, Angela disappears from the census reports, her fate unknown. 1619 gave birth to the great paradox of our nation's founding, slavery in the midst of freedom, marking both the origin of the most important political development in American history, the rise of democracy, and the emergence of what would become one of the nation's greatest challenges, the corrosive legacy of racial discrimination and inequality that has afflicted our society since its earliest years. But my evening will not be spent dismantling the legacy of that horror, but rather I want to create a portal for the ancestors that they might enter the room, that they might come this evening to bear witness to the incredibility of the seeds they planted, the seeds that are still germinating, pollinating, grafting, and growing worlds that they could never have imagined. Angela's life is a portal that guides my thinking about how we might imagine and reimagine ourselves as a part of and inside of these legacies, how we might see ourselves like Angela at a crossroads. How many of us in this room might be descended from an Angela, a human being with erased identity, except for the identification of enslaved? We know that America has still not confronted the issue of slavery and its correlations to white supremacy, nationalism, the fact that African Americans are incarcerated at 5 more times than the rate of whites, or that, according to mappingpoliceviolence.org, 13 of the largest city police departments kill Black men at higher rates than the US murder rate, and that levels of violent crime in United States cities do not determine rates of police violence. 46% of unarmed people killed by the 100 largest city police departments were Black. These police departments killed unarmed people at a rate 4 times higher than unarmed white people. The enslavement and subhuman treatment of my people during slavery, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow directly informs a far too lengthy timetable that I can enumerate this evening. And yet, like Angela of No Story, we are still burying our dead, but we are still here, remembering these words of Toni Morrison. And oh, my people out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck, unnoosed and straight. So love your neck, put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, and hold it up. And all your inside parts that they'd just as soon slop for hogs. You got to love them. The dark, dark liver, love it. Love it and the beat and beating heart. Love that too. More than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart, for this is the prize. In the late 1700s, enslaved Haitian women were considered more unruly and more unmanageable than their male counterparts. So they were punished harsher and more frequently. They used their only single weapon of defense. They used their tongues, their voices. They would not shut up. They were holding their histories. Every breath was a breath of resistance. Over and over again, they screamed in their own way declarations, many declarations of I am here. I am here. This evening, I celebrate that power of utterance, the smallest unit of speech. I am here. I am here is a continuous unit of speech, beginning and ending with a clear pause, a clear declaration of power. We are now standing inside of those clear pauses, clothed in a newness within our humanity, understanding that we are the authors of our own lives. We are reimagining how we will continue to carry our history, our stories. So we never forget who we are when our authorship is being compromised, usurped, ignored, erased, disrespected, silenced, held hostage, disenfranchised, devalued, misappropriated, or even rewritten. We are carrying the strength of an unknown but powerfully present Angela, first African woman documented in Virginia. The strong ancestral DNA that empties into the collective veins of so many of us compelled me, after watching live the toppling of Silent Sam last August, compelled me to speak, to declare, like the Haitian women, that I am here. I am here to do the bidding as the other daughter of this confederacy, redeeming all the colored wenches horsewhipped by scores of Julian cars across the South. This recalibration of language is an act of freedom, authenticity, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional preservation. We are unraveling the twisted legacies of the humanity that is extracted from the discussions about oppression by taking back the power of our narratives that have always rested heavily on language. No more are we allowing the identity of ourselves to be dictated by other or by white people who, like Angela's story, took her name, took her story. Angela arriving without story or name. Black people have taken ownership of our identity on our terms. As writers, we define the story now and own our history through an intentional focus outside of the white gaze. We are reclaiming our connectedness across the diaspora, despite cultural differences based on how we were colonized. We are resisting racism and anti-Blackness by repossessing our cultural identifications. We are standing up and reaching beyond as truth tellers. Let me tell you a story about truth telling. My grandmother's grandmother was the property of the white slave owner who owned her family. My grandmother's grandmother was the child of the white plantation owner. She specifically was the property of her half 3-year-old sister, a little white girl that she was instructed to care for daily, to ensure that this child was clean, was fed, and always had a companion. The white woman, the mother, did not like my grandmother's grandmother for obvious reasons. My grandmother's grandmother was always told to stay out of the missus' way. The woman always wanted to sell this child, but the child being the child of her husband, he would never allow it. My grandmother's grandmother was secretly taught to read and write by her half-white siblings. It was the children's story. It was their secret. The white woman taught her children daily, and my grandmother's grandmother was always present. One day, the white mother was teaching her children in a room where my grandmother's grandmother was present. The white children had forgotten the answer, but they all knew that my grandmother's grandmother knew the answer because she was 9. She was the oldest. They knew she knew. They looked at her and she blurted out the answer. On that day, it was discovered that my grandmother's grandmother could read and write. On that day, my grandmother's grandmother was beaten severely, was thrown out of the plantation house, was sent to live at the edge of the plantation in the bottom with an old slave woman who had lived beyond her service. This was the opportunity for the white woman to rid herself of this child. On the morning when the neighboring plantation owner came to carry my grandmother's grandmother away, he was driving an old buck wagon that was being carried by horses. My grandmother's mother was running behind that wagon, screaming and crying that they not take her child. An old nail fell from the old wooden buck wagon into the dust. My grandmother's mother picked up the nail, kept the nail, and she put it in her pocket and kept it. Years later, my grandmother's mother would be able to buy her child back out of slavery into freedom. That nail has been passed down on the matrilineal side of my family. I have that nail. I keep that nail. That nail, that singular story, instructs, directs, protects, and always compels me to know the bidding that I must do. The American novelist Joan Didion once wrote, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." In many ways, Didion was right. Stories may not seem like a basic survival need, but our brains naturally tell stories in a way and as a way to give structure and meaning to our lives. My grandmother never studied or researched narrative psychology, which is an emerging field of study that examines how stories shape our lives and personalities. But she intuitively understood and passed on to me not only the nail, but how the stories that we tell ourselves play a large role in who we are and how consciousness begins when the brain gains the power, the simple power inside of story. My grandmother's story, and so many similar stories that are being carried by free Black people, now inform how we manifest as generative people who are caring, productive, and committed to making a positive difference in the world. We understand that the basic arc of our generative life scripts is all about going through the storm, the eye of the needle, and coming out of it better than we were before. We understand how our stories have been hijacked. I tell my students at Duke over and over again to be very careful of the lens that they create, that they use to tell or control someone else's story. How many of us have walked into rooms and stories are made up about us that are totally false? No thread of truth whatsoever. In our immediate present lives in this American culture, we witness how judgments, stereotypes, and false information become those stories that literally destroy lives. But be ye careful, very careful with your power and the powerful truths of your story. None of us should ever allow anyone to mute, erase, or malign our story. We must celebrate our stories as the long-term gain and how we are leaving the world, how we are standing at the crossroads, how we are standing up in our power inside of future stories that we have yet to conceive. We celebrate our stories from a perspective of legacy, telling them for future generations. Many of us fly on the wings of ancestor stories, stories they told us so that they might use those stories in their telling for us to use them as compasses, to help us transform, to guide us to learn about history, and to tell our experiences in order to transcend and act beyond our stories. That's what it means to be standing inside of this fire. We have to see beyond this story now, to live more of our potential, understanding that story is one of the greatest bridges from our head to our heart. If you remember to remember your stories, then you will learn that what we keep truly does keep us. We will further understand how our stories organically guide, instruct, inform, and often protect us. This evening, we gather celebrating the clear pauses of our ancestors. For in these pauses, our stories remain. And in those clear pauses, we thrive like Angela. We also will thrive inside of this fire because unlike Angela, we too survived, survive, will survive, and there will be other fires. Our stories hang in the air long after we've dropped the mic, long after we've left the stage, long after our physical lives have left this earth. It is my hope that you will celebrate the power of your utterances. It is my hope standing with you at this crossroads that we will own our stories with a dignified righteousness, that we will help our children and our children's children to understand the power of owning our voices as Black people, especially our Black, brown, red bodies, intellects, and sensibilities, as we move into these spaces that were never open, kind, or receptive to our being in them. I remember hearing Ursula Burns, who became a history maker, and she became the first Black woman CEO of Xerox in 2009, say in a speech, quote, "I didn't learn to be quiet when I had an opinion. The reason they knew who I was is because I told them," end of quote. Or to break it down even further in the words of Lauryn Hill, "I consider myself a crayon. I might not be your favorite color, but one day you're going to need me to complete your picture." All of us, Black, white, red, brown, we must be steadfast in being that fierce crayon every day. We are the stewards of our ancestors' legacies. They see us and all of their reimagined possibilities. All of our ancestors celebrate our purpose, our knowledge, our sensibility, our faith, our generosity, our gratitude, our integrity, our confidence, grace, leadership, courage, swagger, of course. May our stories bind us in that steadfast determination that will change our world for generations and generations. We're at the crossroads, and we do have the tools to dismantle the master's house, and we are doing it. But perhaps the most important words that I can offer tonight for all of us as we leave this space, or as I leave the speaking space, are these words from our ancestor, Audre Lorde. In our work and in our living, we must recognize that difference is a reason for celebration and growth rather than a reason for destruction. Peace and blessings to all of you. Thank you.
My Lord, my Lord. I don't even I feel like I need to say something, but you have really just said it all. My grandmother's grandmother. I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna let the professors and the students hash this out. And so I would like to welcome at this time Professor uh, Professor Morrissey, Marguerite Morrissey. She will be coming. She is a PCC professor of English and African American literature, and I believe humanities as well. Isn't that correct? Okay. She's going to provide both commentary and moderation. And she will be joined by wonderful students from her class and the class of Professor Scott Temple. So let's greet Professor Marguerite Morrissey with a hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Garcia, for your introduction. It's a wonder I can still fit in this frame. I feel like I've been expanding in all directions since I've been sitting here listening, hearing our laureate speak. Professor Green, you make me want to respond to every word that you spoke, but I did manage to hang on to a few that I want to revisit later. I jotted some things down that I want to go back to. You mentioned being energy and matter, unfettered from those who meant to contain us. You mentioned very carefully the names of the countless modern day martyrs and historical uprisings, all those things that we should take note of lest we forget. I'm going to put a pin right there, actually, because I wrote down something that I wanted to add um, when you were mentioning all of the historical uprisings. I was reminded of one of my favorite photos of my boys, my little boys. Well, they're teenagers now, but they were little boys then, and we had taken a trip to New York. Um, uh, just a wonderful trip. I just wanted to spend some time with them. I think I had just been out of town for a while, and I wanted to just be with them in their space and witness life through their eyes. And I have this wonderful picture of them running through the sprinklers in Central Park, just wide open. And it's funny because it's not until this year did I truly learn the history of Central Park. I had no idea that my boys were frolicking over what was once Seneca Village. So many things that we aren't taught. Seneca Village, once a thriving African American community that was demolished to make way for what we now enjoy as Central Park. Those kinds of things we can't forget. Those kinds of things we can't afford to not know. So I just wanted to put a pin in that. You also mentioned those unruly Haitian women who kept declaring, "I am here." That resonated with me. The importance of continuing to carry our story so that we never forget who we are when our authorship is being compromised. Of that ever important ancestral DNA. Your grandmother's grandmother's story. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. You spoke of perpetuating our truths for our children and our children's children. Those things are so important, and I want to come back to all of that. First, though, I want to express my gratitude for East Carolina University, for Pitt Community College. I like to say that I'm the only person I know who fast-tracked a bachelor's degree and a master's degree at a university and then went on to continue my education at a community college. Because I spent 20 years of my life on PCC's campus and pretty much grew up there. Though ECU was my first home away from home, nurturing me through undergraduate and graduate school, I started working at PCC while I was still in graduate school, having been given my first job as a developmental English teacher by Hilda Barrow. I was such an ingenue on campus, younger even than a significant percentage of my students, and they gave me a hard time. They really did. But I earned their respect over time. By that time, I was on a journey. I had been discovering myself and my voice, thanks in part to an eccentric professor of ethnic studies at ECU, who has now since taken her place among the ancestors, Gay Willentz. Some of you will remember her. Her favorite advice to me was always, "Oh my God, girl, lighten up." She would say, "Are you 20 or 60? You're like, honey, you take yourself far too seriously. Come with me. Let me take you to Belize and introduce you to some free spirits." And that she did. I was hooked on travel after that. And nearly a decade later, Dr. Stephanie Rook and some influential others on the campus of PCC made it possible for me to travel to Senegal, West Africa, as part of a Worldview Educator Study Visit. While I was there, I visited Gorée Island. I stood in the holding spaces where slaves were kept. Well, they weren't yet slaves. They were on their way to be slaves. I saw what our ancestors saw, the last view they had before leaving their homeland. We stood in those spaces and we wept. And after that, all of those experiences left me changed. They changed the way I structured my classes, the way I addressed my students. Since then, I've always encouraged my students to take advantage of every opportunity to grow and expand beyond their boundaries as much as possible and as often as possible. That's why I was somewhat saddened when my students did not respond the way I expected them to when I invited them to speak at this event. I knew from reading their early personal narratives and seeing the types of articles they were choosing for summary and for analysis, I knew they had ideas that were worth sharing, yet they were choosing to be silent. And I kept asking myself, why? I even dangled extra credit, the proverbial bait, didn't get a single bite. I continued to ask and I waited and waited. I waited a while before I just copped an attitude and said, fine, I can't make you speak up. But what I can do is use this as a teachable moment. And so I found some stand-ins today whose voices everyone will be glad they heard. I did instruct my students to make sure that even though they weren't going to speak, not all of them, they weren't going to speak, to make sure they were watching via YouTube so they could get schooled a little bit by the people I invited. Before I call on them, though, I prepared a glimpse into my past that I wanted to share. Won't take long, it's just for this occasion, but I thought it was appropriate. When I was a child, barely old enough to string 3 sentences together, I was a dreamer. No, actually, these things that I had were not dreams. They were nightmares. They were night terrors. I dreamed of things I could have never witnessed in real life. I would wake up feverish, drenched in sweat, and I would tell my great grandmother how I had been hiding and running and crawling through hollowed logs and even submerging my head underwater, all in attempts not to be captured. Somebody was after me, but who? I didn't know. And I also did not know then about the possibility of mitochondrial resonance, that ancestral DNA. I just remember being the subject of grown folks' conversation, overhearing things like, that child has been here before. And I had those dreams for years. And then one day they just stopped, just kind of drifted again into distant memory. It would be years later before I encountered those images from my dreams again. And it was while reading Alex Haley's Roots. I just remember sitting there looking at the pages, stunned, my heart about to thump out of my chest, thinking, I have been here before. How can I know these things? Why do they seem so familiar to me? I'm actually, if anybody is writing anything down, especially students, I want to stop right here in mid-story and say, write down this title and this author. Daniel Black And the name of the book is The Coming. Okay? It's The Coming by Daniel Black. If you ever want to be haunted, I mean, absolutely haunted by images from the Middle Passage, this is a book that you'll want to read. Daniel Black, I think, was definitely inspired by the ancestors in retelling this. I mean, there's no way that you can read that and not feel like, well, gosh, maybe he'd been there before. But yeah, write that one down. The Coming by Daniel Black. Reading Roots opened up a new world to me, one that I hadn't been taught about, yet I seem to know it well. And I can remember when the movie premiered on TV. I'm telling my age. The movie came on primetime TV. My great-grandmother refused to watch it. She simply would not. She says, I'll never watch it. And as far as I know, she never did. I guess it was too close for her. She probably had the same dreams that I had, or perhaps she could even remember overhearing those older than her actually recounting things they had seen with their own eyes. She was born before 1910, so I can't imagine the things that she must have seen or heard. But I do remember a parallel from something I read in Roots and something she used to say to me often. In Roots, the character Kunta Kinte named his daughter Kizzy, which he said in the Mandinka tongue meant, you stay put. That was his feeble attempt to anchor her in time and space so that she would never be sold away from her family. You stay put. That phrase reminds me of something my great-grandmother would say to me often. She would say, mind yourself, Suge. That was her term of endearment for me, Suge. And she would always say it, mind yourself. To me, the child with 1,000 questions and a tendency to wander off in search of things that were never lost, she would say, mind yourself. I know that was her way of saying, be careful, be watchful, stay in your protected place. Kind of, you stay put. In the world in which she came of age, that advice was imperative to daily life. You lived if you knew your place. If you stayed within certain boundaries, you stayed alive. You stay put was imperative to everyday life. Those who did not became bloody examples. So I understand now why she would say to me, mind yourself. I imagine it's like chitlins. It's what we had, it's what we knew, and what sustained us at the time. Whereas staying put was once a necessary part of survival. If we are to survive now, we no longer have the luxury of staying put. We cannot be silent. We cannot be stagnant. We cannot be stationary. We cannot be controlled or cajoled into giving away our birthright. Let us reimagine mind yourself, deconstruct and reconstruct it. Mind yourself then becomes an admonishment to know yourself, to know your origin, your history, herstory, the foundation of your strength. Mind yourself becomes take full inventory of your potential. Never let another define the space you take up. Mind yourself. Mind yourself becomes educate yourself. Learn outside of your borders and boundaries, both mental and geographical. Study, travel, grow, spread, resonate. And in doing so, you not only carve out a path for yourself, but you keep that ancestral spirit alive. Those who came before us don't drift away. They don't disappear. They are not forgotten. How about that? They've stayed put. Hear them say, we are still here. Now you mind yourself. So at this time, I want to introduce to you those that I have called to speak alongside me. First and foremost, I want to introduce S. Denise Newton, who studied communications at Regent University and has written several books, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. She's a former host of Solutions Now Radio. Additionally, she's an inspirational speaker, a U.S. Army veteran. I invited Ms. Newton to speak on the importance of travel, study abroad, and the broadening of student horizons and developing them into global citizens. I think that minority students in particular should strive to see more of the world, especially those areas where Black and Brown are less diluted and people have a strong connection to their cultural identities. Ms. Newton, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just such a delight. Everything I've heard so far, I'm just sitting here just eating it all up. It's like having a second dinner tonight. So thank you for having me. All I can say is that when I was a little girl, and certainly that was before Bing and Google and all of these search engines, we didn't have all that. I used to sit and look in encyclopedias, and I always became fixated on Africa. And I used to always say, one day I'm going to go there. I should be just so, the tribal markings on the face, the clothing, and all these stuff is just fascinating to see. And I used to always say, I'm going to go one day. And I used to get teased. You're never going to go there. You're never going to go there. It costs too much money, but I always knew that I would make it there one day. And I did too. It took me a long time to get there, but I finally went there in 2011. I was invited there actually on a mission. But one of the, and two, what you're saying here, the importance of traveling and experiencing other cultures. There is such a, in some ways, there's so many stereotypes and misconceptions about, especially with Africa. And, I think about listening to younger people talk about Africa in the sense of like, there's just something so unknown, so different, so bad because they look at some things in the media and you don't always see the best. The media don't always produce the best things, the best images coming out of Africa. So, when I went over there, even I myself was just actually so pleasantly surprised that a lot of the things that I saw was not at all what I was accustomed to seeing in the media, seeing it up close and personal, actually interacting with people in South Africa where I was at that time. And sitting at the feet of some African matriarchs and learning some history from them. It was just amazing. And I think it's important, especially for our young people, our Black and Brown young people, to make that cultural connection. Because sometimes I've even heard, in working in an elementary school, listening to young children make fun of, darker complexion children, children from Africa, and things that they don't really know about, but listening to what other people have taught them or said about others. So I think it's important for us to make that cultural connection, to instill that pride, because when I actually went over there, it was a chest, just stick your chest out, be prideful of who you are, where you come from. Our history has been turbulent, it has been painful, but I am just still just so happy to be who God made me to be. And I think that the exposure to other cultures would definitely serve us in a more positive way, that we can definitely learn so much, and it would make us on a global scale, we're all one as far as humanity is concerned. And, the Bible says that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So we are all one as far as humanity is concerned, but we all have a voice in what happens in our earth and what happens in our world. And it's going to take that travel back and forth and learning about other cultures and experiencing other things to do that. Get outside of what we know, the familiar, and see other things. And I think that's something that's really, really needed. And everything that I saw while I was there, I was able to put into my first book, Two Continents, One Hope. And that one hope is that we can one day really get that pride, that I wish that I could see wide scale of who we really are. I know, again, we see so many things happening with us as Black people that is so painful still, with all of the brutality that we're still experiencing, that sometimes I've even heard people say, I wish I wasn't Black, because all of these, just seems like everything so bad just happens to us. I don't feel that way, because no matter what happens, we are who God made us. And I do believe that if we were able to branch out more and to travel more and experience more, and just see that we are a blessed people, regardless of the things that we see in the media, that it would definitely serve us in a very positive way. So I just thank God for that opportunity. And I do, as soon as this pandemic calms down, I'm off right back to the continent. So yeah, that's a great thing. The travel is definitely needed. So all you young people that's listening, you ever get the opportunity to do it, you will not regret it. And I'm telling you, you won't miss a beat. They got everything there that we got here. So please go see it for yourself. Don't just rely on images that you see in the media. That would be what I would say to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Thank you so much. Did you have anything else you wanted to share?
No more than just I am right now. I'm just working on different things with little ones. I'm starting with little ones to try to get them to pay attention to the continent of Africa. I talk to them about Africa. I started my family actually, and I'm actually doing put a spoken word project set to music that just sells Africa. And I have them to listen to it, and they just love it. So that is what I want to see, and I believe that's what God would have me to do. I wish I could just bridge the two continents into one, where we are in Africa together, and just make it one. But in the meantime, my whole thing is, what I would love to see happen is just for us just to remain, to be pride, have pride in who we are. One last thing too. When I did go to Africa, there was a young man. He was 11 years old. Was a street poet, and I will never forget how he stood there and just gave the whole history of South Africa pretty much in a poem. And he didn't miss a beat, and the pride that he displayed, and the way he was able to just tell that story in just in a minute, and just tell it so powerfully. I was just so impressed, and I just came back and talked about that young man so much. People was like, "Oh gosh, you want to tell that story again?" But it was just important because he was just so proud to be able to say, "I know my history, and I want the world to know. Anybody who will listen, I want to be able to tell it." So that's just what I would want to share. I just want to see that happen, that our young people just be proud of who you are, and just make our ancestors proud. Just keep it going. Keep it going. Let's make some new history, by the way, too.
Thank you, Ms. Newton.
Thank you.
Now, if you will, welcome Danielle Melvin Koontz, PhD candidate and social entrepreneur with deep ties to the North Carolina landscape. I've invited Professor Koontz to briefly speak on one of the recurring themes in Professor Green's presentation, that of ancestral DNA. The importance of legacy and continuing to amplify the voices and experience of those who came before us. I know you, Professor Koontz, as an avid reader, student, professor, and educator, on and on, you know the value of past literary voices. It's obvious to you, but our current generation of students, particularly those in the community college setting, by and large, are not readers per se, and therefore they don't always recognize the names and works of those who've been the conduits between our past and our present. Not only the literary greats, but even within our families and our communities, we have seemingly lost sight of the value of the voices of elders. Who are we without our griots? How can we expect to maintain our footing, to gain more traction and keep advancing in society if we downplay, or even more tragically, forget altogether the struggles and accomplishments of those who came before us? Professor Koontz?
Am I unmuted? Okay, just wanted to make sure I'm unmuted. So thank you so much, Marguerite. We go away. And thank you for this honor. And Professor Green, your words were just amazing. So I was trying to keep myself composed. And please forgive me if you hear any background because, you know, it's the pandemic and I have children and one of them really wants me right now. So forgive me if you do hear some background noise. But I really just thank you and I just honor you, Professor Green, for sharing your story of the nail. That is amazing that you can actually touch something and go back so far. So I want to just correct one thing that you said, Marguerite, because you say that students don't read anymore, but they do. They actually probably read more than we read because they're always on social media. They're always on the internet. They're always on Facebook. So they're constantly reading words. The challenge is to get them to read different words. And so one thing that I do in the classroom is I actually pull, and some of you who are in the teaching world, you may want to do this. I actually pull up websites just to get them to see, like, and I'll say, why don't you guys just add this to your browser? Or, you know, I think it's poets.org, you can sign up to get a poem a day. So I just have them just put their email in there because I think it's our responsibility to use the social media, use the internet as a way to connect them and connect them to our past as well. So I do want to encourage that. In terms of ancestral power, I'm going to, Miss Regina, you mentioned Lovecraft, and I finally watched one episode, and so I kind of want to share what happened. My husband, he's been trying to get me to watch. So I finally watched one episode, and there was the fire poem, and I stopped him, like I couldn't even watch. I was like, I know that voice. And it was bothering me because I knew the voice, but I could not remember the name behind that voice. And so I had to pause the television and Google. And then I felt such a relief. I said, I knew that was Sonia Sanchez. And so I realized that there's twofold story in that. The fact is, somewhere along the line, I heard her speak that poem. And it's probably been years ago, like I don't even remember. But the fact that it was triggered through Lovecraft. And what I realized for students is so important that sometimes that we share the stories of the past because it could be years removed from their classroom experience, but they won't forget those voices and they won't forget the power behind those words. And lastly, I don't want to take up too much time, but I do remember as a young child, like Marguerite, you know, we both lived our lives in books. Books were our best friends. And one thing that I wish that I wouldn't have done so much is I so magnified the stories of my book heroes. I mean, I just thought Alice Walker just could walk on water, Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston. When I discovered her, I mean, I just was like fainted, like, wow, these are people writing about the areas that I'm from. And it wasn't until I went off to college and, you know, so I'm working on a PhD, but I have a master's in English, an undergraduate degree in English. And I realized that I had not really valued the stories in my own community. And so now both my grandmothers are gone. And so Professor Green, when you were speaking about the portal, I took a note. You said the portal for the ancestors. That's so hard because now that my grandmothers are gone, now that many of the elderly people in my community have long passed, I now realize that they're relying on me to continue those stories. And even though I magnified the book here, you know, the authors of my childhood, there's still a story left to be told. And so I really encourage all the students listening to make sure that you don't forget the stories of your community, whether it's rural or urban, whether it's international, you have a story. And although there are thousands and millions of books, there's still a story left to be told. And so, you know, when I'm not studying and when I'm not putting kids to sleep, I do like to do a lot of social activism. And, you know, I've done several. I was in the DMV area, so I was doing a lot of marches up there. And now I'm working with some North Carolina organizations. And it was amazing to me when you, obviously, if you're just following the movement on television, you'll miss a lot of this. But if you ever go and get involved on the local level. So many meetings I went to, there would be snippets of poems, particularly Lucille Clifton. Margaret Walker comes to mind as well. And you would have somebody from Howard who would write a few lines on the board, and that's how the meeting would start. And so those stories are still fashioning and forming this new movement. I heard someone, I don't know why they said this, but I heard someone say, this is not your grandmother's civil rights movement. That is such baloney, because those stories, and it is certainly your grandmother and your great-grandmother and your great-grandmother's movement, because those stories are still fashioning the movement, fashioning young people, fashioning our passion, the passion of the movement. So the fire, that ember came well before any of us did, and it is still being blown and it is still being ignited. So I really encourage students to think about the stories that they may be overlooking, the story of their own life and the story of their ancestors, because I found that I valued my grandmother's stories, but I did not realize how priceless they were until they left. And so every letter I have, every little snippet of writing of just their handwriting is so priceless now. And so I hope that I can encourage students to value their own stories. So thank you so much, Professor Green, for encouraging me and igniting that fire in me. And thank you, Marguerite, for allowing me to be on this panel.
Thank you, Danielle. I know that we have so many more people who want to speak. I do have 2 more people who will briefly come and say something. I want to introduce to you author and poet Nakia Lassal. Sometimes I just count myself just blessed to find myself in the company of people. I know it's God ordained. She's someone I encountered at a Black Writers Conference, another one of those events that PCC paid for me to go to. And I remember years ago, her voice, I've never been able to get it to stop reverberating in my head. She definitely has something to say to today's student about the power of voice. Nakia, I'm reminded of one of the first glimpses I ever had of your awesomeness, your strong sense of self-possession. It was upon hearing you deliver a poem called I Am a Tree. I think in this very tumultuous climate we're currently navigating, it can be a struggle to keep sight of our value. And I was telling a friend the other day that it seems that after President Obama was elected, America imploded. The forces of white supremacy started working overtime to remind us of our place in society, lest we believe in our power as a people. Every weapon possible has been hurled at us in hopes of pushing us back into despair and into silence. I think about how few of my students were even willing to actively participate in this event because they may think so little of their own voices and what they may have to contribute, and that's sad. They have opinions and ideas, but they mute themselves. And we are doomed if we don't recognize the power of our voices. So just tell us, how is it that you, Black female, single mother, all the other titles, having worked in the public and private entrepreneurial setting, where your voice could be muted, but you've managed to understand and demonstrate the value of taking up space and remaining not just vocal, but relevant and valued in today's society. Please enlighten us.
Hi, Marguerite. It's been a long time. Thank
Yes,
you
it
for
has.
inviting me on to talk about this. Like, I am so passionate about using your voice and owning it. So this is just perfect for me. And I think tonight it seems like grandmothers are a very common theme, because that's where I got my self-awareness from. Growing up, my grandmother used to say all the time that my name is Ethel and I cover all of the ground that I stand on. She used to say it so much about everything. She would tell us how she covered every inch of ground that she stood on. And I think I just took that to heart and I never forgot it. Whenever I'm in doubt, and I do doubt, I'm human, and that's a human emotion, a human thing, is to feel like I can't do something. But I think about what she said, my name is Ethel, and I cover all of the ground that I stand on. Well, my name is Nakia, and I cover all of the ground that I stand on. Wherever I am, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. Whenever I'm speaking, that's exactly what I'm supposed to say. I know who I am. I walk in a room and I am prepared, no matter how uncomfortable others try to make me in that room, because I move in a lot of spaces where I am the only Black person. I'm the only Black person in the boardroom. I'm the only Black person in the office, in the building, on a plane. Like, I have been in these situations, but I know me and I should be here. Not just you. Like, you're not the only one allowed to move about the country freely. That is a right to me. And I take that right very seriously. And so when I am standing, I completely cover this ground. I have something to say and I say it. I say it. I don't let anyone stop me. I've been in meetings where, like, I feel like that's just me feeling like I'm the small person in the room. However, I have the answer. So I should speak up, So when you ask about, like, taking up space, well, I'm not taking anything. This space belongs to me. All of this. Right? It belongs to me. So I think we kind of have to change that word, taking. What am I taking? I'm not taking. I'm owning what is rightfully mine. And I am not moving until I get what I came for. And that's so important. And so, I know you invited your students to participate, and I can understand that there was, like, some trepidation there for them, but you guys have to learn. This is your space. This is your time. You have to take the baton. You have to use your voice, like, all of you. So you can't become afraid or feel like you don't have anything worthy to say, because you do. If we all felt that way, we wouldn't get anywhere, right? So cover all the ground that you stand on. Say it, go there, do. Because this is your space. This is your time. This is your fire. Get in it. Get in it.
You, Nakia. Actually, can I ask Professor Garcia, Regina, are you trying to send me a message? Okay.
Yes.
I thought I saw something go
Yes.
across my
I
screen.
did. I did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I was just I just wanted to remind, we said 8 o'clock, so we want to make sure we get get everyone in. So I'm wondering if it's possible, if we could, perhaps our next guest could come in the Q&A section at the very beginning of the Q&A section.
Not a problem at all. Actually, I think it'd probably be fitting if Jessica, if you are still here and you can stick around until the Q&A setting, you being the one person that I invited who's a former PCC student of mine, I think that what you have to say actually will fit perfectly during that Q&A, if you can just hang on and bear with us a little bit. Thank you. Sorry, Regina.
It's all right. Thank you. Thank you. This is all good stuff. I told someone, I said, I feel like this is a spiritual kind of experience here. And but we are just so excited to have everyone here and able to offer insight on these very relevant themes. I do want to bring back our featured presenter, Sister Jackie Shelton Green. The floor is yours again as we talk about these bodies.
Well, I really, really don't like to be the talking head. I really don't. as much as I talk. So I thought for this section, I would address it poetically. But first, I really want to thank Professor Morrissey and Ms. Newton and Ms. LaShaw and Professor Koontz for kind of providing a circle, an embrace. Thank you for really articulating the stories, the experiences of many, many, many Black women. You know, our stories are not singular stories. They belong to all of us. You know, if you bring a group of Black women into a room, regardless of from whence we enter geographically, you know, we all have some stories that connect. You know, you bring a fruit jar into the room and sit it on a table, and Black women have stories about that fruit jar. You bring objects and sit them on the table. You bring a can of Royal Crown grease and sit it on the table, or you bring a pack of red fox stockings. Those of us, I'm 67, so I know what red fox stockings are. These symbols, I was just listening to all of you and thinking how we find ourselves over and over again in each other's stories. So if we're using language, if we're telling stories, if we're writing poetry, if we're making music, if we're choreographing dances, whatever we do, if we are not making art for the sake of other people to find their way inside of it, then it is a total misuse of our creativity. You know, they're artists and they're artists and they're artists. But when we're in the flow, the ego, you know, disappears, and it does become a moment for the spirit. You know, we do have genetic DNA. We do have what I call genetic deja vu, where sometimes I think I'm remembering something that is my story, and it's really not my story. It's genetic deja vu that I'm experiencing from an ancestor. So the ancestors are always here. They're always present, and they protect us. I want to start with a poem, since I started talking about ancestors. And this is a Juneteenth poem, and it's called This I Know for Sure. We are the breath, the skin, the muscles, the heart, the hands, the unmeasurable bones whispering across the Atlantic Ocean. We are the bellies of Middle Passage ships. We are Blue Door of No Return on Goree Island. We are the mornings that broke with our living and our dead fastened together. We are the eyes bearing witness to sharks following our human cargo, waiting for the feast of dead or sick bodies tossed overboard. We are the shadows in the back of the eyes of daughters throwing themselves and their babies overboard. Our blood is the red that stole the blue of the ocean. We are scattered bones rising up from the bottom of the Atlantic, revealing a pathway, marking the route. We are the fruit of those bone trees planted deep in the fertile Atlantic. We carry a DNA of survival, strength, extraordinary will. From forced migration to slave market, we are all the links of all the chains of the past and future, binding spiritual links from the bones in the Atlantic to the bones of slaves in a place like Galveston, Texas, where ancestral whispers became the wind, caressing tired bones with a timeless spirit of rebirth and love. The wind heard first, whispering from the trees, from the ground beneath their feet, whispering, freedom, freedom, freedom. The wind knew and rattled tiny bones beneath the feathers of birds. The wind knew, giving voice to the rain falling, creating fertile freedom ground. The wind whispered to every butterfly, every insect pollinating from flower to flower. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Eagles stopped in midair to listen to the wind song. Freedom came today. Freedom came today. And because our people are a chosen people, we could understand the dance of the trees, the tremble of the water. Hoes stopped striking. Hands stopped picking. Feet stood still. A mighty storm named freedom reigned over them, soaked them clean. Mothers kissed hope into the air above babies' heads. Grandmothers and grandfathers stretched prayers into a sky that would not bend. Men asked, where will this freedom live? Children asked, what does this freedom taste like? What does this freedom smell like? What does this freedom sound like? What does this freedom look like? Mama, Mama, tell me, what does freedom gonna feel like? We screamed a jubilee into the clouds. We shed the skin of a slave. We shed the rags of a slave into the river. Our freedom skin was a shining brand new nakedness that outshined the sun. We be clothed in freedom's gold. On Juneteenth, dead bones came alive and flew on the wings of Sankofa birds all the way back to the river where blood is born. All the way back to the river where blood is born. All the way back to the womb that never forgets. We are the Juneteenth resurrection. We are the ancient prayers answered. We are the cup overflowing, inviting generations to this feast of freedom. And I wanted to respond, well, a couple of things I wanted to say, just responding to the last conversation. Ajanu Ellis is featured in an amazing Bitter Southerner. If you know anything about Bitter Southerner magazine, you can catch it online from Bloodcraft. Am I saying it right? From Bloodcraft, the actress. She has an amazing story that everybody should read about her Mississippi home and upbringing that really informs who she is as an outstanding voice on the stage and in theater. A really good article. But I wanted to respond to something that the professor said about, and I think Ms. Newton too, about how we're reaching and the poet, how we are reaching our students. One of the things I do in my documentary studies is I teach Lemonade. We dismantle Lemonade frame by frame, because inside of Lemonade, and I am not a Beyonce fan, and people have to realize that Beyonce did not make Lemonade. Beyonce does not have that broadband, but Beyonce has that money. So cultural theorists, historians, and a ton of creative minds created that video Lemonade. But Lemonade is chocked full of everything that we've been talking about tonight: miscegenation, ancestral beliefs. There's so much candomblé, Santeria. Everything is there if we know how to take it apart. So our students are watching things, but I'm not sure that they always know what they're watching. I also teach Childish Gambino's This Is America, which is an amazing, powerful framework that bumps up against, the current events that we're talking about now. And how do we use the power of storytelling? How do we use the power of poetics, documentary poetry, to reframe this history and this current history? Since we've been talking about grandmothers, I want to read a poem for my grandmother that I wrote several years ago when I did a residency with women on death row, North Carolina Women's Correction. So I was not on death row. Let's just get that straight. I was not on death row, but I did a residency with women who were serving time on death row. And because I'm a teaching writer, whatever assignment I give to my students, I also do the assignment. So several poems in one of my collections comes from that experience of working with disenfranchised writers, with writers who are marginalized, who are on the edge of the literary canon. So this poem is for my grandmother and for all of our grandmothers. I know the grandmother one had hands. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in bowls, folding, pinching, rolling the dough, making the bread. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always underwater, sifting rice, bluing clothes, starching lives. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in the earth, planting seeds, removing weeds, growing knives, burying sons. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always under the cloth, pushing it along, helping it birth into skirt, dress, curtains to lock out night. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the hair, parting, plaiting, twisting it into rainbows. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside pockets, holding the knots, counting the twisted veins, holding on to herself, lest her hands disappear into sky. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the clouds, poking holes for the rain to fall. And I'm going to stay inside of this 15-minute time frame. So, Professor Garcia, how am I doing?
I didn't look at the clock when you started, but I think you're doing okay. I think you're doing okay. We just want to make sure that the students get in are able to respond to some of the stuff you say.
Yeah, especially since we have students here, we have to hold space for their voices and their points and their lessons to us. So I'm kind of torn about reading one poem. I'm going to read a poem though that is about another ancestor. My great grandfather. My great grandfather's name is Caswell Holt. Was Caswell Holt. Caswell Holt and his family were enslaved people on the Holt Plantation, which is in Alamance County. And it's actually a historic space that we could go to right now. And I've spent a lot of time in this space over the years. But in the past 2 years, PBS did a documentary that was created by USA Pictures. So a New York film crew came and spent a week with me talking about what it meant to be the first African-American poet laureate. And we went in many different spaces that I inhabit. And one of those spaces is this plantation space. Because when I'm there, we all know what happens during a lynching, but I was more fascinated, and my inquiry was to ask the trees, was to think about what it means when the ecology, when the natural world is, especially the natural world, because it's changed forever when it experiences a lynching. My great-grandfather, Caswell Holt, and his brother were the first Reconstruction sheriffs in Alamance County, North Carolina. One day they arrested a white woman for public drunkenness downtown Burlington, North Carolina. That night they were dragged out of their homes by the Klan. They both were lynched. The story is that my great uncles died, but Caswell's body was still breathing when, and this is the family hand-me-down story, and all of this is documented by historians. And historians kind of don't believe the family part of it. But Caswell was still living and they hid his body. We know that Caswell survived because later in the 1800s, he would travel to Washington, D.C. and testify, according to historians, at an anti-Klan public hearing on Capitol Hill in Washington. So we know he survived that lynching. But when I am there, this is one of the largest plantations in the southeastern US. And yet there is very little evidence that we were there. We're there. You know, his bill of sales is upstairs in a glass case. He was sold or purchased for $700. And I have a copy of that bill of sales. These documents that we keep, what we keep does keep us. But every time I'm there and I've been to the site of the lynching, my questions are not for the slaves. My questions are not for the men, but for the trees. I wanted to ask the trees. I wanted to ask the trees, do you remember? Were you there? Did you shudder? Did your skin cry out against the skin of my great uncle's skin? Was the smell of bark skin a different smell from the smell of meat flesh, human meat flesh? Beloved father, husband, lover, friend, man flesh. Could the air discern burning tongue from burning arm? Does the neck bone stay intact or grizzle like the shaft of toes, fingers, ears? I wanted to ask the trees, were you there? Did you shudder? Are you an elder that wailed out loud when they strung him up on your youngest branch? No mercy even for the lynching of new sprawling birch limbs, just learning how to crawl towards an unemancipated sky. Are you a grandchild or great-grandchild of the tree that drank his blood? The tree that cried tears into the rope around his neck, his arms, his legs. I wanted to ask the trees, but the ground spoke first, unknowing the perfectly manicured azaleas, knowing a perfect picket fence, knowing perfect graves of perfect skeletons, whose blood-stained hands are forever etched on the hearts of my ancestors who cried out to me. Plantation ground scratching the soles of my feet, begging me to listen, begging me to lie down, be still, because they have waited for this day, when someone would come and dance with their spirits. They waited. They are everywhere on the plantation ground, holding up this house that dares to ignore them, holding up a sanitized history and herstory. One for the books, one for the trees, one for us. I wanted to ask the trees, do you remember? Did you refuse to hold his weight? Did your branches crackle? Did you refuse to hold him? Did you feel his blood in your roots? Did you feed his blood to your roots? Who are these new trees? Look how they glisten against an unshackled firmament. Did you tell them that his blood was the only nourishment you could find that entire season? Did you tell them it was a winter of blood? No rain, no snow, blood storms, lightning and thunder lifting other names unto the wind's tongue. So many names for the wind to carry. So much hair, teeth, bones for the ground to gather. I wanted to ask the trees, who will carry your stories? Who are your historians? Who will measure the rings of ropes that wrapped around your waist, your shoulders, under your arms, beneath your head? I wanted to ask the trees, did you forget to breathe when the red thunder inside you painted everything the color of love? I want to ask the trees, do you remember? Do your branches still crackle under his weight? Do you shudder? Do you know mercy? And I'm going to end on a poem, which is a poem of lamentation that comes out of a response to a project called Poetry of Lamentation that was started in New York City by a group of poets who were responding to the deaths of Black and brown and red people and white people at the hands of police. They wanted to create a portal where families could know that people who did not even know them across the United States were holding this space of grief, this space of sorrow, to recognize that their loved ones were here. The projects operated in this way. If you agreed to participate, you would be given a link to a newspaper article or a news bite from a radio or TV station about your person. When I accepted this charge or mission, after a few minutes, I realized I was actually waiting for someone to die. And it was unsettling. Within 24 hours, I received my person. I received a link to a TV station somewhere in Michigan, and it was less than 30 seconds. Unidentified African American dies on Route 44. More news tonight on the 6 o'clock news. That was the information. That was all I had. No name, no story. Oh, my brother. Oh, my brother, my brother. I will weep for you whenever the sun rises or falls. Your shadow has been betrayed. The red of the bullet bleeds and covers every breath of all the life you've lived. Oh, my brother, my brother. I will stand here and wail your name. Hold the bullet inside my mouth that cannot stop convulsing with pain. I will learn to swallow the spasms in your screams. I am calling my brothers and my sisters to the ground beside this river where your blood is born, where your blood runs until it is clear, until its red is spent, and it stands up like the wind and speaks into a light we cannot name. Oh, my brother, my brother. I beat my chest, pierce my hands, run back and forth naked in rain, trying to swallow this red of a bullet that knew your name, cracked open your smile, stole your hair. Oh, my brother, I weep for all I do not know about you. I weep with the bullet that is lodged in my throat, whispering its own requiem. The red of the bullet cries out your name. The bullet whispers to me about the flowers that heard the sound. The bullet whispers to me about the sorcery of forgiveness. The bullet whispers to me about black flies stirring the ground beneath your feet. Oh, my brother, who will wash your feet, save the sand inside your shoes? Oh, my brother, where is your mother, your father? Who will help me scrape the dried blood that blocks the doorway of your heart? I want to be the water, the sweet oils that rub into the skin of you. I want to hold your bones steady so your mother can identify your face. Rub the soft earlobes she's kissed 1,000 times. Oh, my brother, how must we hold your lover who wants a redemption for your skin, who searches for your lips in the dark? Oh, my brother, there is so much blood falling from the sky today, suffocating the light, suffocating the babies. I will guard your roadkill blood. If necessary, I will chew the bullet and digest metallic contradiction. I will be the shovel in the crypt. I will sing your name until the wind lifts it from my tongue and sings your legacy into the 10th degree of sound. I will well the presence of your history through this throat that is out of rhythm. We be poets, the daughters of your winters and the sons of your summers. We be ancient scribes, the architects of your sweat and your tears. My poems will be forever screaming the life of you. I dare the red of the bullet to forget. I dare the killer of you to remember. My words are the acid erasing the crime scene. My words are the softness of all the evidence of ghost hidden beneath your shirt, inside your underwear. Hungry ghost, casting your name into rivers. Oh, my brother, what are the ancestors singing? Oh, my brother, you don't have to behave in your grave. Oh, my brother, call me, and these lyrics will gather arms. Stage your rebellion. The red of the bullet has the poetry of your spirit embedded with indelible ink. Oh, my brother, hear the wail of the red of the bullet. Hear the space between your ribs crumble. Hear the sounds in your chest become a roaring ocean. Hear the butterflies cease flying. Hear this silence that will not be quiet. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have been waiting with bated breath to hear the poetry of our poet laureate, um, Sister Jackie Shelton Green. You have been I don't even know what to say, more than what I ever uh, could have hoped for. And so we thank you so much. We're going to go now um, into a section which will be moderated by Professor Jeremiah Miles from East Carolina University. He is the coordinator for ECU Ethnic Studies, the ECU Ethnic Studies program, and he is an English professor as well. Professor Miles, take it away.
It is great to be here. I have been enriched and embraced by all the things that have been said here. It's been actually very beautiful. Now, my section, however, is kind of, it has a dark side to it and a light side to it. It's like the Force. Okay, so let me explain, especially from what I've just heard. My part is supposed to deal with extracting bodies and souls with bones and beatification. So the bones is the dark, the beatification is the light. You know, we're extracting bodies and souls from these things. The power of animus, the spirit in inanimate and inanimate objects, like Miss Jackie Shelton Green was just talking about, they move us. They tell our history. They become a part of who we are, leaving markers of our failures and successes, our joys and our angers throughout time. So our humanity thrives in all of nature, although sometimes you might not know how to access it. One very real aspect of this talk is, how do Blacks self-create themselves into a new identity that challenges the preconceived notions and stereotypes and prejudices held about them in America? This self-creation was, in a sense, like, especially during the Harlem Renaissance, the Renaissance was less a rebirth. That's what Renaissance means. It means rebirth, but it was more like a birth. It was nascent, all right? Because at that time, there was only negative images or concepts of Blackness at that particular time. So how do we birth or give birth to a new Black soul? I know I'm saying this as a man, but the idea is still there. I can't give birth to anything, but but I can give birth to ideas and concepts, right? I think they called it the new Negro during the Harlem Renaissance, right? So what you have to do, you have to establish a history. That's one of the things they wanted to do. And that you were here before, because in a way, they were trying to take that history and that past away. And you deserve to be here now. You want to know that you deserve to be here, all right? Seemingly because being in the world is something that you have to prove, apparently, to the majority of the people. So at 19, just out of high school, Langston Hughes wrote this poem on a scrap of paper while riding on a train, and he was 19 years old. So just remember that, students, 19. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo as it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen his muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Now, Hughes, what he does brilliantly here in this section is that he's talking about extracting bodies and souls with bones and beatification. Now, beatification it means like to bless or to be supremely happy, or in the Catholic Church term, it means like you're happy that somebody has gained interest, the deceased person has gained interest into heaven. All right. So to play with that word a bit, this poem beatifies the entrance of Black folks into humanity as a significant people with a significant history, known because of the objects we've seen, the rivers, and those same objects that remember who we are. All right? There's life in those rivers. They lull, they sing, they have souls and veins. Their imbued life reflects the lives of Black folks. They have animus, they have spirit. So knowing you have a wondrous past is important to establishing a sense of self. Knowing you survived a torturous past is also important. It establishes your mettle, the mental and spiritual toughness to survive horrors, strength that is hopefully passed on to the next generation. This is what Jackie Shelton Green does in her poem, I Wanted to Ask the Trees. I think, a poem, I think, which is similar to Hughes in that it has the participation of animate objects. I call trees and rivers animate because trees grow, rivers flow, in the recollection of Black history. Although the poem can sound accusatory, as if the trees were complicit in the hanging, I think that the narrator talks to them because she knows that they might listen when the perpetrators of the crime obviously did not. In effect, she's begging for compassion from the trees when she knows it won't come from anyone else that has done the lynching itself. Once again, the trees have animus. As I quote from the poem she just read, I wanted to ask the trees, were you there? Did you shudder? Are you an elder that wailed out loud when they strung him up on your youngest branch? No mercy even for the lynching of new sprawling birch limbs, just learning themselves how to crawl towards an unemancipated sky. Are you a grandchild or great-grandchild of the tree that drank his blood? The tree that cried tears into the rope around his neck, his arms, his legs. I wanted to ask the trees, but the ground spoke first. So the poet laureate goes a step farther than Billie Holiday or Nina Simone, who both sang of southern trees bearing strange fruit. They sung of the visceral horror, but Jackie Shelton Green invites us into a conversation with nature as a witness to the crime. I think, I hope I'm doing you okay, Ms. Green. So you are a part of the world. We see the rivers, right? You survive the various pains of the world. We question the trees. So the next step into a full identity is to envision yourself in the future of that world. Right? This is also what those early pioneers were doing in the Harlem Renaissance. The question was asked, what is our future here? Some said none, like Marcus Garvey, who literally wanted to go back to Africa. All right? This is even more important of a question now, although it shouldn't have to be a question. What is our future in America? Oh, my brother is a lament to the futures of those that were cut short, but it's also a challenge for the future, to injustice. As she says, my poems will be forever screaming the life of you. I dare the red of the bullet to forget. Here, like the rivers and the trees, the bullet is given a spirit, a violent one that reflects in the death of each life it takes. But the bullet, is questioned or focused on, and not the puller of the trigger. Seemingly, to do so is pointless, all right? At least as an exercise, and becomes an exercise in dire frustration. And I know that's how a lot of people feel now, like, how can I talk to these people? How can I talk to the one that shoots me? I don't have a chance. There's no talking, there's no humanity there, because I'm sort of like objectified in that particular sense. The extraction of bodies and souls through bones and beatification. The theme of this section is heavy in this poem. Ancestral spirits are asked to guide us. Hungry ghosts, incited by sin and the evil intent of the death, surround the victim's clothes. And because all life is sacred, the bullet passing through the body of the doomed becomes a partial receptacle of his soul, giving rise to protests over the unjust deaths that it has been used to take. In an interview, Jackie Shelton Green stated, "My ancestors are always with me. My deceased daughter is always with me, guiding me. Their spirits and the spirits that embody the natural world all contain an essence of us. So although we lament, we still have hope. And through hope, we take righteous action. And with the knowledge of our history, the assuredness that we will persist and succeed, combined with the guidance of our ancestors, this will create that future we've been dreaming about for 400 years." All right, that's my spiel. I thought it was... Now, I think we're at the question and answer period, so I'm not sure.
We are. Okay. And so what we're going to do is kind of combine your students that may not have had their opportunity to speak yet, and then bring in the general public just for a few minutes. We're going to end in exchange. And yes, we have run over our time, but that's okay. This has all been, everything has just, we couldn't have planned it better in regards to the level of energy, the insight, and all of what we've encountered here today. And so I'm going to ask you and Cherie and Derek to kind of facilitate bringing forward the students, and then those from the public.
Okay, well, I have some students here, and Scott has some students here. Scott, you still on there? And I think also Marguerite had a person here, so I guess we can all reflect on what we've shared tonight in a discussion, in a great discussion. So who wants to start? That's how it always starts in class. Oh, Bradford Boyd has something to say though.
All right, I appreciate this. I appreciate this opportunity. It was an honor to actually be sitting here listening to you all. I wrote a poem myself, and I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm just going to read it real quick and give it to you guys. It's called American Dream. My black is hated with no idea why. Treated like ish, yet you wonder why we cry. We're all humans, but separated by color and class. God created us to be the same, but my black comes up last. All life should have equal value, but we know that's not the case. You want us to be gone, make a wish, black lives erased. You own it all, you're still mad at me. We're hard with limited resources just to be the best we can be. It's not a black and white. You should be happy receiving scraps. What's wrong with y'all? I'm not standing for this crap. It's my turn to speak, so you better listen clear. This is my world too, and I ain't going nowhere. My life deserves respect. Take the time to listen to me. Not for being a man, but this is the land of the free. 100 years of slavery, still left scars I can't forget. God, we need you more than ever. Help them realize the cause and effect. We scream Black Lives Matter, but do you know what it means? No, you don't, because our black was not a part of your American dream. Thank you.
I have
Okay,
to ask whose student that is. Whose student is that? Who?
That's mine. That's my student.
Okay, okay, wonderful, wonderful.
I don't know which one's the student though. Sometimes he's teaching me more than I know.
Right.
come on, guys. There's got to be some commentary out there, or some thoughts, some impressions.
I'll go. Hi, everyone. I'm Brianna West. I'm a senior at ECU, major in community services, minor in family studies. First, I would like to thank everyone for allowing us to be here, our peers that are watching as well, to be a part of this event. I don't think there's any better time to start talking about Fire at the Crossroad. I agree with many things said and expressed by everyone. I've learned so much. Something I've realized for myself is that I have so much more learning to do about my ancestors. Professor Guerra gave us 3 of Professor Green's poems. She read 2 of them, Letter from the Other Daughter of the Confederacy, which I want to kind of talk about like how I experienced them. So that one was more of a historical experience for me. The Oh My Brother was more of like a modern day experience for me, and that's the one I really want to talk about. And then the poem titled I Wanted to Ask the Trees, which that withheld, but I felt like a lot of feelings and emotions with that one. And so when I read these colorfully written poems in this order, each time it just felt like I was getting deeper and deeper. But the one that really stuck with me was the Oh My Brother poem. And this poem brought so much fighting fire to my heart while still having like these shaky breaths, because like someone mentioned earlier about being haunted by voices, images, and whatnot, being a young adult and experiencing my 19 years of experiences and seeing the things I've seen and am seeing today. As I read this poem, Oh My Brother, these names ran by me visually: George Floyd, Mayor Rice, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, on, things that are happening right now. So when you wrote, I will learn to swallow the spasms in your screams, George Floyd's last words and dying breaths are followed. Then it says, I will guard your roadkill blood. If necessary, I will chew the bullet and digest metallic contradiction. I will sing your name until the wind lifts it from my tongue and sings your legacy into the 10th degree of sound. And I just want to say, like, that is just something that spoke to me, because I think I could speak for these rising generations. Like, we have these voices are rising, and these are voices that not only want to be heard but will be heard. So I think that Oh My Brother is stuck with me, of this modern day of, like, we're fighting for them. We're not being quiet for Breonna. We're not being quiet for George. We're still gonna keep fighting. So that was my input. Thank you.
That was great input, Brianna.
Can I ask that right in that space, since she actually spoke about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, can I get Jessica J. Bennett? Jessica, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Everybody, Jessica was a student of mine at PCC, very reluctant student. I remember her. She was a problem for a minute. And we actually laugh about that all the time, because she took, like most of us, a little time to find herself. But I have followed her since her time at PCC. She went on to graduate from ECU. She's a mathematics instructor now, a PhD candidate. She has embodied all the things that I would want for any student, from PCC, ECU, wherever for that matter. The question that I had posed to her earlier this week, actually, though, was about how she's able to maintain her identity. I don't know if anyone else who is listening or who can see her knows her, but Jessica is one of the people that I would say just owns her spirit. You see her, and being in academia, being among, having gone to a predominantly white institution, now teaching at one. She has maintained her hair and locks, and she holds her head up straight. She has this regalness about her that actually just it makes me beam with pride every time I think about this reluctant student that I used to have. And so I definitely did not want this event to pass without her recounting some of her experience and just how she feels in this moment, this time in history, the present. Jessica?
Yes. So I'm a little bit, I guess, the oddball out since I am in the STEM field. Everyone else here is arts and humanities. However, my grandmother was an English major at Spelman College. And the sixth president of Morehouse College, which was right across the street from them, was Benjamin E. Mays during the time that she was there. So I want to start with a quote and also end with a quote from him. And this is one thing that my grandmother always drilled into me and also my mother. Whatever you do, strive to do it so well that no man living and no man dead and no man yet to be born could do it any better. And I have tried to live by this. As Marguerite stated, I was that student. I did give her a hard time. And why did I give her a hard time? Because I was finding myself during that time. I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I needed to go back to school and do something. So she posed the question, Jessica, what are you doing? So I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? You need to go on and do something else beyond these walls. I said, okay, I will. I just don't know what. So I went on to ECU, and also now I'm currently at North Carolina A&T State University in the Computational Science and Engineering program, where I am using my background in mathematics and also my current platform as an educator in the community college system here in North Carolina to do research on minorities in STEM and what success factors lie there in their success. What factors are there for their success, or what can cause any of these students to not go on and be successful in STEM? Now, to answer your question, Marguerite, everything that's been said tonight is where my strength comes from, ancestors. So I am a fifth generation educator. My great-great-grandfather was born a slave and died a professor. He graduated from Shaw University in 1893. He died a professor and also a business owner. And also my grandmother, who graduated from Spelman College, my late grandmother, graduated from Spelman College, and she went on to teach 35 years in the state of North Carolina. And my mother now is retired educator as well from North Carolina. And she attended St. Augustine's College in Raleigh, North Carolina, and did her graduate work at Iowa State University. When she went to Iowa State University, she was one of a handful of Blacks that were recruited from small private HBCUs in North Carolina to go out to the Midwest to large predominantly white institutions to see if they could handle being graduate material in those types of settings. So I took those experiences and also knowing where I come from to give me the strength that I needed to go on and complete my degrees and also to continue to push forward. You know, my ideology has always been, if they can do it, I can too. So when you talk about owning my locks, my look, you know, my walk, my talk, it has been hard. You know, going on job interviews and getting the look. They see Jessica, they don't see Black woman. And I've actually been told that before. You'd be surprised the things that people will say to you during a job interview. Also, you know, I try to just continue to be myself because there are so many people, not myself included, and my colleagues and my friends and people that I grew up with that have been constantly told by the older Black community, and some whom did not have some of the experiences that my mother and my grandmother had, that, hey, if you have natural hair, you won't be able to get a job. If you have locks, you won't be able to get a job. You will be viewed as militant. You will be conceived as a threat. And you know, I listened, but I didn't let that stop me. Because like I said, if they can do it, I can do it. When I was at East Carolina, I experienced a professor that had his ears gauged and he was tatted from head to toe. So, and this person was Caucasian male. So in my mind, if he can do it, so can I. So I decided that I would take my experiences and my platform to be somewhat more of a silent voice. You know, if you see me and you know what I do for a living, then you'll say, oh, well, you can look like this, or you can be a certain way and still be a professional. You know, not to take away from professionalism in itself, but, you know, if they can do it, so can I. All right. And I also want to end on another Benjamin E. Mays quote. It must be borne in mind that the tragedy of life does not lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy of life lies in having no goal to reach. Thank you again, Marguerite.
Jessica, so proud of you. Thank you.
I think I saw that Professor Cherie White has someone that has posed a question in the chat room.
That is correct. We have a question here from Joe. She says, I currently work at a hospital with a mostly white people base. I maintain caution with my white coworkers, talk about things such as politics, gossip, etc. Do you have any pointers for me?
Well, hello, my name is Aman. I am a student at East Carolina. I am a junior. I am a public health major. What an enlightenment group. I enjoy hearing all you guys' poems. It's wonderful. Well, on that question, I believe that she should just stick to herself, be true to herself, and not let anybody around her change her mindset and influence her differently and affect her any type of way.
I will respond to that, and it's coming from another perspective. You know, we always talk about unmasking and taking our veils getting rid of our veils and lifting veils. There's a time when we have to understand what it means to have a repertoire of masks. We need a whole lot of masks. That is part of our survival technique. And I talked about you walk into a room and people make up their own stories about you. But if we go back and think about slavery, and, you know, there are all the stories of the Uncle Tom in slavery. But, you know, actually Uncle Tom was doing a lot of what Brother Man would call the ugly mess, you know? The Uncle Tom was a gatekeeper. He acted one way, but he gave information, vital information, to enslaved people who were trying to get away to freedom. Now, I'm not saying that you should be an Uncle Tom at work. That's not what I'm implying. But I think that we have to have masks for our protections. And right now, because we do imbibe a lot of emotion and a lot of what's, you know, we hold all of everybody else's stuff. Historically, Black women have always held a lot of everybody else's pain. Historically, we held the white woman's pain from her white man. We held the pain from him inflicting pain on us. We held the pain of the world. We held our children's pain, our partner's pains. But it is a time when we really have to have the armor. That armor is truth, knowing who we are. So be truly, as Sister was just talking about, knowing who she was. You know, that, you know, I get the same, I'm 67 years old. I get the same stuff about hair. The only problem is I'm not trying to climb anybody's career tree. I'm here. You know, I'm not trying to get tenure anywhere. Done that, been that. I'm trying to go home and sit down and not do anything. That's what I want to do. But we have to know how to protect ourselves right now more than, and I don't mean being defensive, but we need to know how to have those conversations and really how to take control of those conversations. So that the next time somebody asks you something, they will think, oh, I need to think about asking her this question again. Like, we have to be ready. And how are we ready? How do we ready ourselves? By being very, very clear on who we are, what we're willing to give. Because in these workplaces, sometimes everybody wants to hear our opinion, or people assume that we can fix it, or we have more answers than they have. It is not a Black issue. The question right now is really, what does it mean to be? James Baldwin asked this a long time ago. The question on the table is, what does it mean to be an American? That's the question. Because some of us have decided we're not American. Some of us decided that this is not necessarily going to be our home place for years to come. And especially if things turn a certain way next week. So for the person who answered the question, just make sure that you put on the armor of knowledge and the armor of self-love. And that self-love will protect you. That self-love will keep you in the space that you need to be in. And it also makes people think about that they are not the gatekeepers. You know, sometimes in these workplaces, white folk decide they are the gatekeepers when they tell us, you know, how they want us to be comfortable. And I always tell them I am comfortable. I am comfortable. So that would be my response, is be very, very comfortable with making other folk uncomfortable because you are comfortable.
Can I say one thing to that? Can I say one thing to that? I think it's also to our job as Black people to not always, like she said, to piggyback on what she said, not to get so defensive. Take it as an opportunity to teach. Because a lot of times I find that my white friends, they say stuff, but they don't know. I can't judge them for what they don't know. But they are asking, they're kind of crying out for opportunity to learn. And sometimes because we're so quick to get upset and angry about any little thing, we don't give them an opportunity to try to really figure out what it is they're trying to ask. So sometimes I think it's very important too that sometimes we just got to listen more than we talk. And then once we figure out what's going on, we can help. And once that's done, it's up to them what they do with that knowledge. Because sometimes they take that knowledge back to other people. But we really, really, really have to be cautious about, about certain things and anything, because anything is nothing, but something is a lot. So we really got to take that and really understand it and take it a long way and just really try to help educate people that don't know. I appreciate that.
Right. And I also believe that with that knowledge that you do give to somebody else, you have to make sure you have to watch out who you give that knowledge to, because you don't know who else you are enlightening and what that knowledge, they could be giving it to somebody else. And they probably could like tell on you if it's even in a work environment. As a African-American woman, I'm talking to somebody that's Caucasian and I enlighten them with some of my information. They probably could take that to my boss and be like, hey, this is what they told me, ... you know?
Now, Brother Boyd, I appreciate that. The flip side of that is, I think how we educate is leading people to the resources. People need to self-educate. Black folk are tired. We are tired of having the role of educating. So yes, we should be mindful. I'm very respectful and very open to my white friends when they ask questions. But I think I empower them by saying, have you read this book? Have you seen this video? Check out this. Because at the end of the day, after about 15 of those conversations, I am emotionally and spiritually bankrupt sometimes. And I'm going to say it again, I think white America has really relied on us for too many generations to figure out their lack of love. America's problem is that it does not have any love for itself. America's problem is self-hate. If America loved itself, it would not need to other everybody else in order to feel good about itself. So how do we help our fellow brothers and sisters to fall in love with themselves? It's an ugly history, our collective histories. But I think we have to, I hear you. I just think it's a double-edged sword when we put ourselves in this role that it's my, you know what I mean, out of compassion, it's my job. I don't believe that we really teach other people. I think we facilitate spaces and facilitate process where people can educate themselves. It's like, you know, we've been giving all the knowledge. The history is here. You know, look at us. How many generations later are we? And how many other ancestors have attempted to educate, to leave? The knowledge is there. The sister just quoted, you know, Benjamin Mays. All of this knowledge has been here for generations. And I think what's happening now is historians and writers and, you know, scholars, everyday people, the barbershop, what's happening in the nail salon. These stories are educating, but it ain't my role. You know, I can't be the cleanup lady no more. I've got, you know, we've got some work to do. We have some work to do. We have some work to do between now and next week. And I don't care what happens next week. Folk have promised us we're going to have some work to do after that. That's real. Our lives are on the line.
I agree with Professor Green here that it is not our job to teach them, and the history is there for them to learn. If we keep teaching them, I think this pattern is going to continue for the next couple of generations. I think people have to start learning on their own, and that's when the healing begins, and that's when they start understanding where you are or the kind of person you are. If you keep teaching them, they keep expecting it to go on forever and ever, and the self-learning and understanding where you come from would never come from their end. They would just expect it to come from you. If they have to start understanding where you are coming from, you have to stop we have to stop teaching it to them. The understanding has to come from within. It cannot come from an outside space, is what I would say. That's when the healing from our past histories can begin, or even we can think of, you know, going to a better place from there.
Thank you so much for that comment. And I do just as we prepare to kind of transition on into the ending phases of our exchange here, I do want to just make the statement about the teaching. I am 53 years old, and I I've 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 seen a lot in my 53 years. Um, but I think about how, I've seen the advent of social media and how there is so much information out there, and you have to kind of discern whether or not it is information that is accurate, or information that's designed to or is propaganda or designed to achieve some nefarious goal. But I do just want to say, one of the things that I think about when I think about teaching people, I think about that term Black Lives Matter, and I think about how I've seen it explained so many times what that means, and people act like anytime there's a new explanation, it's or another explanation is something that they haven't heard before. That's why I don't even argue with people about that anymore. I don't argue with people about things that are obviously true. Sometimes the education that people claim they want is not the education that they really want. They want to be affirmed in the ideas that they possess. And I'm gonna leave it right there.
I think like Brother Boyd was saying there. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, and I also understand where Jackie's coming from at the same time. I mean, at one point, you don't want to teach somebody all the time, but and the other side of that is that they're going to get their information from somewhere, and it's usually going to be a bad place because everybody's in their own echo chambers these days, and their echo chamber is just going to reverb what they want to hear anyway, So without any kind of challenge to somebody's already preconceived notions, they're just going to keep on believing and keep on, what they were believing before. So there's no chance for change or dialogue. I think the whole thing is that we still want to establish dialogue. We don't necessarily want to teach somebody all the time, but you still want to establish a dialogue so that you can learn from one another, if that's possible. But like you said, I mean, in a dire sense, Regina's also right. It's like, well, Black Lives Matter. How many times I got to explain that, man? It's not a terrorist group, like how many times, man? How many times I got to say? But so people, in some ways, people would just want to hear what they want to hear anyway. But without any dialogue, we're just like, I don't know, we're just kind of running in place. You know what I'm saying?
And Brother Boyd, I just want to say, I did not say what I said to negate what you said, because you're absolutely right. We do have, I'm a teacher, so I understand the necessity of teaching, and so I don't think that what is being said is necessarily that we don't need to teach. But I do think, I know where Sister Jackie Shelton Green is that sometimes people will use you to assuage their own guilt. And we just can't allow that. We can't, I mean, how long must we do that?
I would like to input to go off of what Professor Miles said regarding a lot of people, especially my generation, and with social media and everything. A lot of us are seeing a bunch of information, like Professor Green said, that is not necessarily true, and it's a very biased all over social media. To be honest with you, until I was about 18 years old, I didn't really understand what was going on with politics and socioeconomic status and the race and everything, and especially with being in this ethics class is my actually first ethics studies class in my life. I can say it's one of the best classes because I'm able to speak, and we're able to discuss with people across, like right now we're talking with students in the Ukraine. A few weeks ago, we just finished talking with the Gambian people, students from the Gambia. There's just so many different stories and perspectives to everything, and it's just unfortunate that, like I have good friends on social media, and I mean, I have friends that are Republican, I have friends that are Democrat, liberal, conservative, whatever you want to call them, and I just see these like posts of things that are just so one-sided, and it's just so involved and wrapped in emotion, and emotions, like I've said multiple times in the discussions during classes, emotion, especially anger, that's the strongest human emotion. With anger, people will feel empowered, they'll feel strong, they just will do, and then with that emotion, they are not afraid to do anything. They and if a lot of people, it's like a bandwagon. With social media, people are not going to say things to your face that people will say to you on social media. It's just so unfortunate. And it's something that I've been told is, you always want to lead with value and always over deliver. And that's something I've been told by a mentor of mine. And that's what I try to live by every day of my life. And one other realization of mine, when I was 17, I realized that, if you're giving advice to somebody about a certain situation they're in, but then you find yourself in that same situation, but don't take your own advice, you're not only lying to them, but you're lying to yourself, and I really believe that once you understand and become, understand and appreciate who you are personally, then you're able to then branch out to like, okay, well, this is my perspective. What do I see? But someone else, what I want to see, what they think, what they believe, because I'm white, I'm not of colored skin. And one of my good friends, Gina, she's Arab. And she told me a story that when she was growing up, she was in school and in middle school or high school, I believe it was, and people would say she has a bomb in her book bag. And knowing Gina, she's a great person. Just these prejudices and implicit biases that and stereotypes, of people of all races, ethnicity, everything, and it's just gotten to a point where it's just so polarized. It's either you're on this side or this side, and you're either, if you're on this side and not with me, you're a bad person. We don't like you, and like everyone here has been saying, the big message is, understanding, learning to hear another person's voice and be accepting and being an open mind to everything. So that's at least, what I'm going to share with you guys. So.
Thank you so much for that, Cameron. I got a message that our host for this evening does have something that is coming up, so we're going to have to go on and and wrap this up. I have so enjoyed you, and everybody, all of you, love, hand claps, all claps. You have been wonderful. I thank you. We thank you so much, Professor Jackie Shelton Green. I don't even know what I have done in my life to deserve this, but I am so glad to have been in your presence. Can't hear you. Your mute is on. Yeah.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you all. Cameron, I was getting ready to write you a note. Thank you for speaking your truths. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say corny. It's going to sound corny. Some of my best friends are young white males like you. So we have to, what it's really all about is building relationships one at a time. That's the only way we're going to do it. It's building relationships, intimate relationships. I just want to thank you for speaking so frankly. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say to everybody who participated, Professor Miles, Professor Morrissey, Professor Howard, Professor White, Dean Rook. We see your face down there, a little picture on the screen, but your support has been invaluable. Scott Temple, you the man. he had the idea, and I know it rolled out a lot larger than perhaps what he initially thought it was
Which
going to
is
be.
great.
But
It's great.
yeah, it's been a great exchange. And Lord have mercy, thank you to Ken Peel, who has been our host, our long-suffering host for this evening. We give you all the claps and
And of course, to you, Regina. Regina, your wonderful leadership in all this, and it's been just great to have you on here.
You've been on it, Regina. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, anyway, I'm gonna end. Dr. Shelton, Professor Shelton Green, we're gonna talk because we got business. So we're gonna talk. I'll message you after this. All right. If all hearts and minds are clear, we will leave this virtual space.
Thank you for all the students that came. Thank you for all the students.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
You guys have a good night.
I like the smartest students ever in the world.
Have a good one. I'll see you guys on Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.